Hello guys, in this video we'll build secure sign up and login using Rust. We'll be learning a lot of concepts today, so make sure you hang tight and watch till the end. We'll be creating a full stack application where on front end we'll use NextJs, we'll add bunch of React components for login, registering the user and profile page. On backend we'll use Rust and we'll implement cookies based authentication, which is an interesting concept to learn in Rust, and then how to handle it with Next.js. And then we'll also implement token validity. Basically, we'll implement the expiry for our token, and every time we get a request, we'll check the validity as well. We'll also learn the concepts of hashing since we'll be storing the passwords, and we'll be using Postgres SQL database for our DB, and we'll use Diesel ORM. So let's begin. First of all, we'll implement the backend using Rust. So make sure you are in a nice and clean project. Open your terminal to add the cargo package. So we'll just do cargo new backend. And there you go, the backend directory is added. Add a Docker Compose YAML file in your project. And as always in my videos, we'll not be doing any kind of installations or setups for the DB. We'll just spin up the Docker instance of Postgres. So we'll just do version as, let's say 3.8 and services Postgres, image as Postgres latest, and ports we'll just print the default port, so 5432, and then we'll pass a few environment variable where Postgres user as admin and Postgres password as admin123 and Postgres DB as, let's say, customer DB. So we have our DB, password and user. Now providing the password and credentials here might not be the ideal practice, but since we are just in a dev environment, so we can just experiment by simply specifying the passwords and credentials here. And we'll open our terminal and ls cd to backend and just do docker compose up for -d for detached, and we'll just do docker ps, and there you go, our container is up and running. So let's close this terminal and back to our project explorer, and in the same backend project we'll add a .env to set up our connection URL. So database URL Postgres admin123 localhost and customer DB, mostly all the details that we just added here in the environment variable, user, password and DB. So similarly DB instance as localhost, password and username and the Postgres. So this is our database URL. We'll just store it here. Back to the project explorer. Now we'll be using Diesel CLI to initialize our database and add customer table. So we'll open our terminal, and if you don't have Diesel installed on your machine, Diesel CLI, just do cargo install Diesel CLI. But since I already have it installed on my machine, so I'll just do Diesel setup. But first make sure you are in the backend project. As you can see, we were not. And then we'll just do cargo Diesel setup, So as you can see, a migrations directory is added in our backend project, and we will delete the initial setup. We don't need it. Now we can just do Diesel migration generate and the name. So the name of our migration will be customer. So as you can see, inside the migrations we have a timestamp -customer directory with a up.sql and a down.sql. So we'll move to up.sql first and add our query. So pretty straightforward. We'll just do create table and customers member ID as serial, basically system generated, and name as varchar not null. Then we have password as varchar not null, and finally we have email as varchar not null and unique. So we'll just have 4 columns. Now let's create our table. So we'll just do diesel, but first let's make sure we are in the right place. We are not, so let's move. And now we'll just do diesel migration run. So as you can see, command exited with success, meaning our table is created. So we can close all of these. We don't need now. We already have completed this step. And go to SRC. In SRC, add a auth RS, a DBRS, handler, model, and password helper. And schema is auto-generated by Diesel. So this is how our schema looks like. But first, let's go to model, where we'll add our model as well as our payloads. So let's begin. Actually, before we start, let's add a few dependencies. So move to the Project Explorer, and in the Backend project, move to cargo toml file. We'll add Actix Web for our backend, and Diesel as our ORM with version as latest, features as R2D2 and Postgres. And then we'll use .env for reading the environment variables, and environment logger for logging, R2D2 again for DB, and Surday we'll be using for serialization and deserialization. Then we need log to add some custom logs, JSON web token for JWT, and Actix course to enable the course, since we'll be calling our endpoints from browser, and SHA-2 for hashing. So we'll be using SHA or SHA hashing, and hex for encoding, and chrono for dead time, since we'll be setting the expiry in our tokens. And that's pretty much all that we need today in our dependencies. Make sure you add all of these dependencies with whatever the latest version is when you are watching this video, and build your project. And let's get back to model. So the first model we'll add is customer, and member ID as I32, name as string, and password as string, and email as string. And we'll add a few attributes or macro: queryable, serializable, and debug. And the second thing we need is a new customer, and name as string, password as string, email as string. So derive, insertable, and deserializable. Then we'll add diesel and table name as customers. Make sure this is same to what the table name that we are using in our DB. And we have diesel table name, and then we'll add a payload for login. So pub email as string and pub password as string. So derive, deserialize, and then we have login response or profile details, we can call it. So pub name as string and pub email as string, which is derive, serialize, and debug. And finally we have an impl for customer. So impl customer fn to response and self profile details name self.name.clone and email as self.email. Actually, we miss the email here, so let's add it. And that's all that we need to return in the response. So that's all for our model RS. So once we have our model RS, we'll move to DB service. And first of all, we'll add a type DB pool R2D2 pool connection manager PG connection, which is Postgres connection, and we'll add a DB service. So a struct for DB service pool DB pool, and we'll just derive clone, and we'll do impl DB service to add a few queries that we have. First of all, new that returns a DB service .env .ok, and let DB URL environment var, and we can pass our environment variable name, and we'll just move to DB service, and we can just expect DB URL must be set or whatever the error that you want to raise, and manager connection manager PG connection, and new pass that DB URL. So we have our pool, and we'll just do result R2D2 pool builder, and build pass the manager, and expect failed to create DB pool, or you can say failed to initialize as well, which is also a valid DB service, and pool as result. So we have our new. Now let's add a few queries that we have. First of all, create customer. So create customer and self new customer, and we can return a result with unit or error. And make sure to use this error from result in diesel, and we'll just do, so we can just do diesel insert into schema customers table, and values as new customer, and execute with mutable self pool get unwrap and unwrap, otherwise returns okay of unit. Similarly, we have another one which is login, but you can give a different name as well, maybe get by credentials or get by login details, but I'll just refer to this as login, option of customer, and customers dot filter email dot eq login dot email, and make sure to import this email from your schema. And once we have that, we'll add another filter where password.eq login.password, and if that's the case, we want first customer and mutable self.pool.get unwrap and okay to return optional. Similarly, we can just copy this and we can name this get by member ID, and here we can pass member ID as a I32, and here we can just do member ID. Let's name this ID for differentiation ID, and we can remove this and import this. So this is when we are getting profile details from by token. So this is get by member ID, login, create, and new. So we have our DB service ready as well. Now let's move to the handler part. So before adding the handler part, let's move to auth, where we'll add our claims and code to generate JWT token, code to decode the token, and validate the token. So first let's add the struct for claims, and I'll just keep it very simple. Debug, serialize, deserialize, and we'll add a sub as I32. Here we'll be setting our ID to identify our user and an expiry. Now generally the details in your token should be very minimal, and if you want to add more details you can, but I'll just stick with these two details. And then we can do is pub fn generate JWT, and we'll pass the user ID or member ID, you can call it, and a secret, and in result we expect a string which is a valid token or a JSON web token error. So first of all we'll add the expiration. So let expiration UTC now. This is why we added the chrono dependency that we had. Dot check at signed, and I'll just generate it for 3600 seconds. So 3600, basically the token validity is 1 hour. Ideally we should keep it as small as we can, but again depending on our business needs. So timestamp invalid. So we get the timestamp, and we'll just do is claims and sub as our member ID dot to on, and expiration as expiration. So once we have our claims set up, we'll just encode, and we'll do is encode and header default and claims, and encoding key is the secret. So from secret, and we'll just say secret as ref. So this is what makes hard for your token to be decoded, is your secret. So make sure the secret is strong and kept securely. So we have generate JWT. Now we'll add the decode. So decode token and str secret and str, and result as token data claims, or again JSON web token error. So what we'll do is decode and claims, we'll pass our token, we'll pass decoding key from secret and secret as ref, and then we have our validation as default. So we have our decode token, and then finally we'll add is valid to check the expiry. So claims and claims pass the boolean, and claims dot expiry should be greater than UTC now dot timestamp. Now this would work, doesn't matter if you run it cross DC as well. As you can see, the time that we are generating while expiry and also checking is in UTC. So this will always be consistent. This is all that we need in our auth service or auth. Very nice and clean. And now let's move to the handler part. Actually, before adding the handler for our endpoints, move to password helper and let's add the code to generate hash. Now, one way is to use salt technique, where you append some salt to your password and hash it to avoid collisions. But since we already have unique emails and we are expecting very low traffic of users on this website, so I'll just use basic SHA-256 password as string, password and string, let mutable hasher SHA-256 new, and hasher, let's import new and hasher dot update password as bytes, and let hashed pass as hasher dot finalize, and hex as encode hashed pass. So this is all that we need. Basically we get our hash and then we encode it and move to handler. Now let's add the endpoint handler. So we'll just do pub async fn register or create user db web data db service and customer as web json new customer, and will return is http response. So let mutable data customer dot into inner, this is all the JSON that we get from frontend, and we'll add hash password, pass the password, and then we'll replace the password with hash and match db.create customer will pass data, and if we receive a OK of unit, we'll just return http response OK and body as success. If that's not the case and we get an error, then we'll return is println error registering and add the exception, and we'll return http response as internal server error dot body as try again. So this is our first endpoint handler, and let's add the route. So it's a post request which will be routed to /register. Similarly, we will have login. So pub async fn login user db web data db service and login as web json as login details or login credentials, and also return http response. Similarly, we'll just try to hash the password. So whatever the password we get from the user in the login credentials, we'll just try to hash it, and once we hash it, we'll just do login with the credentials, and if we are able to successfully log in and we get some details of the customer. Now here we'll try to set up the cookie in our response. So let cookie build, and the name of the cookie is token, and generate JWT. So detail.member ID as the sub in the claim. So we'll just do pass the secret. So I'll just pass the secret as my secret dev, since it's just the dev environment, and we'll just do unwrap and pass the path slash and max age. So duration seconds, 3600 seconds, same as the expiry of our token, and same site as none, HTTP only as true, so it's not exposed in the browsers, and finish. So we have our cookie, and then we'll just set a response okay with cookie and pass the cookie and finish. And in case of a not happy response, in case we get a none, we'll just respond with HTTP response and internal server error dot body try again. So we have our login as well. Let's add a post request route here. So post and route to /login. Similarly, the last one that we have is profile. So async fn profile db web data db service and request as HTTP request. We actually get the raw object itself instead of parsing it into our required. So here we'll just add post /profile. So once user is logged in, we'll redirect user to the profile page, but we'll only pass the cookie in the request and we'll try to drive the details. So what we'll do is if let some cookie request, so if in the profile request there is some cookie with the name as token, then we'll try to match and decode token. So cookie dot value and the secret that we have. So again, for dev environment, the secret is pretty basic, my secret dev. And if we get some token data, then we work with it. So what we do is if is valid, so we check for the expiry of the token data claims, and if it's not expired, then we get the member by ID. So we'll just token data dot claims sub. Now just to reiterate, what happens is when user is logged in, we basically will request /profile from frontend with literally just passing the cookie of the user, no other details, no request body, and using the cookie will retrieve the details by first validating the cookie, and then we will retrieve the details. So if this returns none, then we will just return HTTP response not found, body as not found. We can have different status code as well, but I'll just stick with this. And if there is some customer that we found, we can just do HTTP response okay dot JSON, and customer is customer dot to response that we just added to limit the fields that we send to our front end using the profile details, and move back to handler And if that's not the case, then we will add a else here that says http response dot unauthorized and body as unauthorized. So this is what we have. And lastly, what we'll try to do is, in case of any error, what we do is http response unauthorized body as invalid token. Actually, we'll place it one level up. So we have final else here, and in case the cookie doesn't exist, then again unauthorized body cookie not found. So how it looks is, if we get the cookie, we'll resolve it, otherwise we return cookie not found. And in case if the decode token fails, then we return is invalid token. And in case if the claims are not valid, then we return as unauthorized, meaning the token is expired. And in other case, we return not found if the member is not found, otherwise we return okay. So this is all the handlers that we have, very nice and clean. Now for the final step, let's move to main.rs and add our server. So first of all, let's add the init for route config and web service config, and let's make this mutable, and cfg.service web scope. The base path is API service register service login user and services profile. And then let's modify main. So we'll call this actix main async, and let's initialize the DB and app data, new DB environment logger builder from env, and env default dot default filter or info. So we want to filter all the logs info or above. Actually, in the handler we added eprint, but instead if we want to use the log here, we can as well error, and similarly you can replace others as well, but I'll just stick as it is. And then http server new move, and let's add the app here, new app data as app data.clone, and configure init for routes, and wrap with actix web middleware logger default, and wrap with cors, so cors default, and we can allow any origin, any method, and any header for now, and also supports credentials. So we have our HTTP server. Let's bend it on port 9000, and let's unwrap it, run it. Finally, let's await. So we'll move all the way to the top and we'll just do stdio result init. So this is all that we need for our backend. Now let's move to the front end side and add our front end. So close the backend project and move to terminal. Clear this. So I'll be using Yarn as the package manager, and if you don't have Yarn installed on your machine, I'll drop a link to the installation guide. Make sure you follow it and install it on your machine. And we'll just do Yarn create next app to add a next app project. And the name of the project, so we can just do my app. Yes, yes, no, yes, yes, no, just keep everything default and let's wait. So as you guys can see, we have our my app directory added in our project. And before start coding, let's add a dependency that we need, my app, and we'll just do yarn add axios. So once axios is added, let's move to the front end side. So first of all, move to src and add a pages directory. Inside the app, whatever you find in the default project, just remove all the files and add a components directory. Let's close all of this. In the components directory, add a login module, login tsx, profile module, profile tsx, and register module and register tsx. So first of all, we'll start with register. So before we start, I already added the CSS for all the three components that we have, but you don't need to worry. I'll just drop this CSS in the description in the assets, so you can just copy and use the same CSS, since no point wasting time on CSS. And let's add our components. So import styles from dot register module CSS, and we'll add a type register form, name as string, and email as string, password as string, and then const register react fc. So we'll add a few set states. So set name as use state string and set as empty initially. So let's copy this for the next two that we have, which is email as set email and password as set password. And then let's add our HTML part before making the handling. So return, and let's add it. So export default register, and let's add the component here now. So div and class name styles dot container, and form on submit will add in a minute, and class name as styles dot form, and div let's use class name as styles dot field, and label, and here we'll just do HTML for name and class name as styles dot label, and the name will be name, and then we have input. So here we'll add the type as text, ID as name, value as name, and on change, which we'll add in a minute, and class name as styles dot input. So we have our first field. Similarly, let's copy this div and use it for email, and here we'll just do email, the type as email, so we get email validation for free, and email and value as email. So this remains the same, and similarly we'll copy this for the last time for password. So password, class name as label, and type as password, so it's hidden, and password and password. And password. So we have everything that we need in terms of divs. Let's add the button, type submit, class name as styles.button, and we'll name this button as register, and we have form closing, and then we'll add a div, the class name as styles dot link container, which we have in our CSS, and we'll add a link href slash and class name as styles.link, and here we'll just say already have an account. So if user already has an account, we just redirect them to the page that we have. Now let's add the handling. So move all the way to the top, and first of all we'll add for handle input change change event HTML input element. So const id value e.target, if id name, then we just call set name, if id as email, then we just set email. Instead of using 3 functions, we are just doing it in one. id as password, we just set password to value. So let's use it, and our on change and on change. Now finally we have to add a API call here, so we'll be using Axios for that. And what we'll do is const handle submit async eForm event, and what we'll do here is e.prevent default const form register form name, email, and password that we get, and we'll just try const response is equals to await axios.post, axios post, and http localhost 9000, that's where we spin up our backend, and /API/register, that's our endpoint, and form that will pass, and in headers we'll pass content type as application JSON, and we have our request. So once we get the response, we check the status. If it's 200, we just do await router dot push http localhost 3001 / basically if it's okay, then redirect to the login page that will add on index. Otherwise we can just console log or console error request failed to register, and in case of try failing, we'll just catch the error, and we can just do console log failed. So we are pretty much ready with all that we need for our register form. It's pretty much ready. Now let's move to the login page. So similarly in login, we'll just do import styles from interface login form, email string, password as string, and const login react.fc, and let's copy instead of rewriting so we can reuse it. And similarly handle change input we can copy as well, just remove the name, and similarly we can copy the component as well. So let's move here, copy this, paste it, and let's remove what we don't want. Handle submit will add in a minute, and we don't want this div, so let's remove this. Email we want, and similarly password we want, and on submit we want the button, but here instead of register let's name it login, and instead of ready we just say create account and /register. So let's add handle submit. Here also I think we can copy and try to modify this instead of again rewriting. So let's copy this and paste it here, and what we can do is instead of register form, now we have our login form. So login form, we get email and password, and then we call endpoint as /login and pass everything, and then here we will say with credentials as true for using and setting the cookies, and if response is okay we'll redirect to profile page, and if request fail we'll just say request fail to login and failed. So pretty much other thing that we can reuse here as well. And last thing is we need an export, so let's add it. So what we can do is export default login. So we have login export as well. Similarly, let's add the final profile, which is a very basic component that we have. So let's add the profile component, styles from and /profile.module.css, interface profile details, name is string and email is string, and then we can just do const profile react fc export default profile and const profile set profile and use state. So we can say it's user profile or null. So we'll initialize it to null. And let's add a very small UI component that we have here. So div class name as styles.profile container, and if we have profile details, then we div and h1 as profile and p tag as name profile.name. Similarly, we add another p tag with, and let's close the div and another p tag. We have our divs, and let's name this as email profile.email, and otherwise we'll just say p loading if there is no profile details, and class name as styles.loading. So pretty simple. I just wanted to show you guys that whenever the user is logged in, is redirected to the profile page and will request with a cookie in a minute. So we have all that we want. And we have all the divs. Now let's add this use effect. So use effect, and so what we'll try to do is fetch. So const fetch profile async and try const response await axios post and profile details, and we'll pass the URL http localhost 9000 API profile and empty body and config, where we'll just say with credentials as true, and if response.status is equals to 200, then we set the profile to response.data, and if that's not the case, then we redirect user back to the login page. So as simple as that. You cannot stay on profile page if you're not logged in. And catch error and await router.push. Now here you can print that error as well, but I'll just go to the login page. And actually similar to this, we can also just do router.push/profile here instead of providing the front-end base URL, which could be anywhere, but I'll keep as it is for now since you guys understand. And here we'll just call fetch profile and router. So we have all the things that we want. And let's add our pages now. Very basic. Move to pages directory. So inside the pages directory, add the index.tsx, profile.tsx and register.tsx. Make sure to name your files just how you want your paths to look like. So let's add the index first. Pretty basic here. Const login page and react.fc, and we will just do return div login, and then we'll just do export default login page. Similarly, we go to profile. Let's copy this profile page and profile page. Similarly, register, and we just add register page, register and register page. So that's pretty much all that we need today for our this secure login app. Now let's go ahead and test it. So just open your terminal and let's first of all spin up our backend. So cargo run quite, and in the next terminal we just go to our v, so my app, and we'll just do yarn dep. So as you can see, backend is up and running, frontend is up and running. Let's go to your favorite browser and test it. So here you go, the first look of our application, nice and clean. Since we don't have any existing account, just create account. And here we'll use Jack as the name. Email is jack@semicolon.in, and password we'll use as 1234. Then we'll press register. As you can see, we are redirected to login page, meaning our registration is successful. So jack@semicolon.in and 1234 as the password. And there you go, we are redirected on the profile page with our details pre-filled. Now if we inspect our terminal, our Chrome basically, and see in the application cookies, you can see our cookie is set up in the browser. That's why in our request the cookie was forwarded and we are able to log in successfully and get our details. So that's it for this video, guys. I hope you guys understand and learn something new, something interesting and exciting. And if you do like the video, share with your friends. I'll catch you guys in the next video. By the way, if you have any questions, queries, feel free to leave in the comments. I'll be happy to help. Thank you.